Now, this section has to do with economics in the city of Detroit, but more so, it has to do with the economics in the state of Michigan. For those of you who don't know it, Detroit, the Motor City, was a great stopping point for black people who left the South with very little in skills. Detroit, the Motor City, was the place where cars were manufactured. You could get a job at one of the car plants with very little in education and work your way up into the middle class. Black people did it, white people did it, everybody did it. What happened was, as people's economic conditions improved, white flight occurred. That is, white people left Detroit to move out into the suburbs of Detroit, which created issues. Now, Detroit wasn't alone in this. You had Detroit, you had Flint, you had Saginaw, you had Grand Rapids. All of those cities were cities that suffered a lot of the same problems. The car industry created a lot of captive markets, i.e. Companies that produce windshields and electronic parts, etc. Okay? When the car industry started to become more, I guess, automated, that started to create problems for the people that were trapped within these industries. And again, as white flight took place in all of these cities, and as the tax bases began to become eroded, the cities were still left with large bills because of the pensions that the car companies had to pay, which those themselves really weren't that much of a problem. The problem was the pensions for the government employees that were working within these cities, and they didn't have the tax revenues in order to support the pensions and the medical plans that these people have. So this section has to do specifically with that, but none of these guys are going, well, none of them. Only one person has asked a question about this, and he's not really going to address it.
For half a century, as you all know, Detroit was the symbol of America's industrial might. 300,000 manufacturing jobs in this city. At last count, there are now fewer than 30,000 manufacturing jobs here, and the unemployment rate in this city is 11%, twice the national average. Senator Cruz, I know that you have general plans for tax reform, but what specifically would you do to bring manufacturing jobs back to America and train residents of cities like Detroit to do those jobs?
Now, reducing taxes is not going to do it, but Ted Cruz is going to basically try to lay all the blame on the Democrats, who basically were the ones that were in elected office, and even that in itself is not true.
Well, Chris, thank you for that question. Let me start by observing that Detroit is a great city with a magnificent legacy that has been utterly decimated by 60 years of failed left-wing policy. You know, Henry Ford revolutionized automobile manufacturing and brought automobiles to the middle class. During World War II, Detroit funded the arsenals of democracy to help us win World War II. In the 1960s, Detroit was the Silicon Valley of America. It had a population of 2 million people, had the highest per capita income in the country. And then for 50 years, Left-wing Democrats have pursued destructive tax policies, weak crime policies, and have driven the citizens out. This city now has just 700,000 citizens. There are vacant homes, one after the other after the other. Crime.
Yeah, and why is that? Who had those vacant homes? It was white people who moved out of Detroit. So he's full of shit. White people moved into the suburbs like they do in a lot of major metropolitan areas, leaving people who can't afford to move out into those same metropolitan areas, urban areas, stuck in those areas. So quite naturally, if white people are moving out and black people can't afford to buy the homes that they're moving out from, the property values are going to drop, as does the tax base.
Crime has been rampant, and it is an outrage. And let me say to folks in the media, that is a story that the media ought to be telling over and over again, the destruction of left-wing policies and the millions who have hurt because of it. Sure.
No, what they should be talking about is the demise of cities like Detroit being directly attributed to white flight.